This has been responsible for the death and disease of billions of people around the world over the past century. Billions. Everyone, almost everyone on earth is affected by this, by these terrible recommendations, these outright frauds and lies from these drug-pushing assholes. People have gotten sick, they've gotten overweight, they've died early, they've died in disease and suffering, having dementia and Alzheimer's, and being enfeebled both mentally and physically. Cholesterol was never the problem. It was a scapegoat by the sugar companies. That's their words, not mine. And so this was never the problem. When we look at total cholesterol, then we're looking at LDL, then we're looking at ratios, and we're looking at ApoB. It's just shifting the goalposts. It was never the damn problem in the first place. You go back and you look at the data that was available at the time, there was no association whatsoever between cholesterol or LDL and heart disease at all. None. And in fact, things like the Framingham study showed an inverse association between total cholesterol and cardiovascular death and mortality, right? So the lower your total cholesterol, the more people died of heart attacks and strokes. So this was just misrepresented. This was the AHA, the American Heart Association, is a pack of lying somethings. And they have multiple times throughout the last century, in well-documented instances, been bought and paid for by the food industries, such as the sugar companies, or people on their boards or in charge of it being on the payroll of the sugar companies, the big food companies. Procter & Gamble bought Crisco from the Germans, who invented it as machine lubricant for tank gears, I believe. And Procter & Gamble bought it and said, yeah, let's just feed it to these idiots. And they paid the American Heart Association $20 million to lie and say that it was better for your heart than animal fats like lard and butter, and say it was really good for your heart. It's much better than this stuff. Don't want that. You want Crisco, this clean, wonderful Crisco, this clean, beautiful machine oil lubricant. It's disgusting, and this isn't conjecture. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's an historical fact. It's on the record. It's a matter of record. So again, I appreciate your doctor's concern, but that is just not what the evidence shows us. What the evidence shows us is that high LDL, low triglycerides means you're very metabolically healthy. You likely don't have metabolic syndrome. You're unlikely to have diabetes. And those are the major risk factors, besides smoking and drinking, for cardiovascular disease. And higher LDL is associated with longevity. Higher total cholesterol is associated with longevity. In studies with 12 million people for LDL, and we just see more and more and more data showing that LDL and total cholesterol have absolutely nothing to do with development of heart disease. There have been 3 studies that I've found that show these results, but one that I'll mention is a 2009 study out of UCLA where they looked at something like 134,000 people who've had a heart attack in, I believe it was just in America, and 73% had low or ideal LDL cholesterol, and about that many had low HDL as well. So HDL is much more predictive of getting a heart attack than LDL was. And of course, the conclusion of these authors were, apparently our threshold for LDL isn't low enough. We need to lower it even more. And it's either, well, if you keep lowering, and this is actual guideline recommendations. If you keep lowering your LDL, but your patient keeps having heart attacks, you just keep lowering that LDL. There's no lower threshold. You can just get rid of LDL, just have 0 of it. It's only poisonous. I mean, that's why our bodies make it. Is because it's poison. It wants to kill us, and we just have to fight nature in order to not die. I mean, how stupid do you have to be to believe that we have an internal kill switch that is just killing us from the inside? That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous statement for any doctor or biologist, serious biologist, to make. But that's the recommendation. It's just lower it, lower it, lower it, lower. Well, when are you going to figure out that if you keep lowering LDL and they keep having heart attacks, when are you going to figure out the LDL isn't the bloody problem there? Use your damn head. But the problem is that people don't, because they're brainwashed. We've been absolutely indoctrinated for a long time, and that include, and I'm talking about doctors have been indoctrinated by the drug companies for a long time, and everyone else as a consequence of that indoctrination. So, think about it this way: we've had genetically the same. So, population genetics. If people study population genetics, you'll understand that if you have a percentage of alleles, genes in a population, regardless of how that population grows or shrinks, expands or shrinks, that you will have that same percentage of alleles in the population, unless there's some mass, genocide and die off, an extinction event, or a mass migration of people coming in. You'll keep that percentage. So right now, we have the same percentage of people that have familial hypercholesterolemia worldwide that we did in the 1800s. The first death from heart attack confirmed on autopsy in America was in 1912. There wasn't a single case throughout American history or the colonies before that. 1912 was the first one. I've been able to find exactly 8 case reports of people dying from a heart attack in all of Europe throughout the entire 18th century. I'm sure there are more, but if that were the most popular killer, we were eating more meat in the 1800s than we were in the early 1900s, because vegetarianism started getting pushed really hard in the 1800s because of the puritanical movement and the temperance movements, because they thought that women especially shouldn't eat meat because it gives them carnal desires. You eat of the flesh, you'll think of the flesh, and no, can't have that. Can't have people reproducing and being healthy and fertile. No, we need to suppress that. And so the idea was, if you were a virtuous person, you would go vegetarian to suppress your sexual urges. In any experiment, any model, and any observation in nature, when animals stop being interested in mating and reproduction, they are sick. There is something wrong. And that's what we're reproducing. That's what they were intentionally reproducing. And you see the meat consumption sort of going down throughout the 1800s, probably as a consequence of this sentiment that you need to eat a vegetarian diet in order to suppress your sexual urges. That's certainly what the Seventh-day Adventists believe, and then they codified that in religious doctrine by saying God said it, and then that spread out from there. And now you have, the consequences of that with Dr. Kellogg's and all the cereal companies that came up as a consequence of Dr. Kellogg's and Sanitarium Foods. The Seventh-day Adventists like Sanitarium Foods, who are the major influencers of nutritional studies, dietetics, the curriculums, and the studies that are being put out. So, this just goes crazy. But again, we're eating more meat in the 1800s. There's exactly 8 deaths from heart attacks in the literature. There's exactly 1 that I can find in the 1700s. With the same exact percentage of people have familial hypercholesterolemia in the 1800s and 1700s and before as we do right now, when this is the #1 killer in the world. So there's just LDL equals death. Why wasn't anyone dying then? And if you say, oh, well, we just didn't notice it, you're retarded, right? We saw 8 of them. So people did know what to look for. Read a textbook from the medical textbook from the 1800s. They are insanely detailed. William Osler's textbook, my great-grandfather was a doctor, he graduated from Columbia, as the youngest ever graduate from Columbia Medical School to date. He was 20 years old when he graduated Columbia Medical School, top of his class. He has William Osler's textbook, and it's that big. I have it at my family's home in America. It is so detailed. There are so many maladies and pathologies of the heart, all these different ways that people can die, and then look and what happened. Oh, and this is what happened. This is not a single damn mention of any coronary thrombi in the coronary vessels. Why is that? They're just too stupid to figure it out. And these guys dissecting everything else about the heart, looking at all these different sorts of things, and they just totally missed that. Just totally missed this big blockage that killed off half the heart and it's scarred over. Really? You know, I mean, you have to be a special kind of stupid or ignorant to believe that. It's wrong. It's dead wrong. So why is it? Why is it that the first heart attack, you know, proven on autopsy was in 1912 in America? 10 years later, there were many more. 10 years after that, #1 killer in America. Now it's the #1 killer worldwide. And there were 8 in all of Europe throughout the entire century of the 1800s. Why is that? Is it really because of cholesterol? Is it really because of meat? We're eating more meat in the 1800s than we were in the 1930s when this was the #1 killer in America, or became the #1 killer in America. We're eating more meat in 1912 than we were in 1930 when this became the #1 killer in America. It was a U-shaped curve. So we're eating less and less and less throughout the 1800s. It dips. It's at its trough in the 1920s and 30s when this becomes the #1 killer, and then it starts slowly coming back up. So there isn't even a correlation. So sorry I belabored that point, but it still really riles me up, obviously. But watch my video, The Truth About Cholesterol and Heart Disease. This has just killed billions of people. I mean, do we get that? Do people understand that? Like this has been responsible for the death and disease of billions of people around the world over the past century. Billions, right? So almost everyone on earth is affected by this, by these terrible recommendations, these outright frauds and lies from these drug-pushing assholes. And people have gotten sick, they've gotten overweight, they've died early, they've died in disease and suffering, and in you know, having dementia and Alzheimer's, and being enfeebled both mentally and physically by the billions. You have 35-year-old men and women having heart attacks and dropping dead in front of their children. You know, they're robbed of their entire life with their kids. Those kids are robbed from their parents for the rest of their life because these assholes, you know, just wanted to make a buck. You know, that pisses me off, and everyone should be pissed off by this. Which, oh well, you know, it doesn't. No, bullshit. F you for ever putting this up. F you for trying to push this nonsense on people. F you for trying to keep propagating this bullshit when we have hard evidence it was a con in the first place. So people like Dr. Allo and these other assholes who just push this sort of shit, probably because they're getting paid off. They just want to try to make a name for themselves because they're just desperate to try to be popular. Like, I'm sorry you didn't have friends in school, but Jesus Christ, don't take it out on the rest of us. Like, no one is benefiting by the nonsense that these people say. People are getting hurt and they are suffering and they are dying by the billions because of this garbage that people have been spewing out there. And it is just time that this just dies. And we just stop doing that and just be like, oh, but cholesterol is like, F off. That was a scam. Not talking about it. And I think that's what I'm going to start doing, is just be like, look, watch my video on it. It's a scam. Don't worry about it, because it's a scam. It is a scam. And we just, you know, the only reason that this is still alive is because we are keeping it alive by even entertaining the discussion. You know, so, oh, but you have to do this. That's bullshit. You're wrong. We're not talking about that. Read a goddamn book. You know, this was just, you know, they made it up. They made it up to push their product and to protect their product. It's crap. Moving on with our lives. And that's what we should do. And the animals don't get dementia in the wild when eating their natural diet, but they will get their eating an unnatural diet. And dementia, Alzheimer's dementia at the very least, didn't exist before 1906 in any real numbers that people would notice. Let's get back to that. I mean, we weren't even full carnivore back then. You know, they're just eating less shit. They're eating more meat, more animal fat, and less garbage.